we have value. So often in today's culture, we have these moments where nobody knows where their value comes from.
Yeah.
We see it frequently. And my first real encounter with this was 6 months into my first youth pastor position. There was a local high school that was near me where 3 kids committed suicide. And during the second one, a number of my children and in my youth group were institutionalized.
On the word of God, I will build my house. I will build my house.
Welcome to Grounded. I'm Steve Hartland, Senior Pastor at Cornerstone Community Church in Joppa, Maryland. But I'm not in Joppa, Maryland today. I'm all the way down in Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky, or close to Louisville. And what's this? We've been at a conference. So 5 guys from Cornerstone Community Church have been at a conference here. It's a pastors and other people's conference. It's about, really, the doctrine of last things in the Bible, known as eschatology. And the whole thing with 11 speakers or something? 11 different speaking sessions. And it's been about eschatology. But one of the reasons you go to a conference is you get to meet a lot of guys, a lot of other people in ministry, a lot of other pastors. So one of a number of guys I got to meet this week is a guy sitting right here with me. His name is Anton Hall. And Anton, where are you from? Tell us about yourself a little bit.
I'm originally from Southern California, but 2.5 years ago, my family and I decided that we were going to come on out, and we have moved out to Northern Kentucky. And I'm the youth and family pastor at Crittenden Baptist Church now. And
pretty cool.
We're about 10 minutes from the Ark encounter there, and it's a great place. We love it here.
Yeah, I want
to
go to that Ark thing. So my oldest son and his wife and their kids went to that Ark thing, and they sent us a lot of photos of them standing in front of the Ark and all that, and I thought, man, I want to go there. Plus, I just respect those people and what they're doing. Is it pretty awesome?
It's an amazing park. Yeah. I mean, just the sheer size of the Ark itself, but then the content they have, the speakers. In fact, one of the speakers that was here last night, Vody, is going to be there tonight. Speaking at the Ark, yeah.
Oh, come on. Is he going to stand up on the boat and preach?
Yeah. They have a big door going in the side, but not quite on the top so much. But yeah, it's a great facility, and we definitely enjoy going to it there. And its partner, the Creation Museum, is amazing.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. Yeah. So back to California. So my wife and kids and I, we were in Riverside, California. You and I already talked about this. From 85 to 95. I probably lost, due to all the smog that was there then, I probably lost 3 years off my lifespan, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, where were you in Southern Cal?
Southern Cal, I was in Riverside, born and raised. So we went around a little bit. Was in the high desert for a few years after I was married. And then we ended up in Paris, California, which was right there, the greater part of Riverside. So we were there up until the point we left just a couple years ago.
And it just so happens you know some people I know down there, and you know a church I know down there.
Absolutely.
So the church I used to pastor, Riverside Bible Church, is now, well, obviously there's a new pastor. He came in right after me. I'm the guy who brought him. He was in Scotland. We brought Robert Elliott over to pastor that church. He's still pastor there. They're in a new location. You've been there.
Absolutely. I started attending in 2001, became a member in 2002, and my wife came to the church, and we met there, and he married us in 2004.
Sweet, and with a Scottish accent.
Oh, yeah, in his full kilt.
Yeah. So he told me about his wedding. He did it in a kilt with the knife in his sock and all, and a sword, saber and all that. But here's what he told me. He said he didn't wear his clan, the Elliott clan's tartan, because it's not good looking. So he wore some other clan's tartan. Oh, you scoundrel! You can't do that, man. You got to stand with your people. But
that's an interesting story. I've never heard that one.
Performed your wedding in a kilt.
Yeah,
that's how. Did you wear a kilt?
No. I did not. We did have a bagpiper there, though.
Oh, I love that.
And he was in his kilt as well.
All right, we want to talk about a couple of topics here in particular. So you and I were sitting around downstairs in the cafeteria talking about, I'll use the Latin phrase, the Imago Dei. And this is something you're pretty keen on, so I'm keen to talk about the Imago Dei. So that's not French, that's not German, that is obviously
Latin.
That's Latin. And what does that mean? And then show us the text where it comes from.
So that is the concept of being created in the image of God. And that comes out of Genesis 1:26. In here it says, then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over everything that moves on the earth. And so this really is this concept that when God has created us, he's created us different from any other created being or creature in the whole of his creation. It's this moment in this beautiful image of God endowing in us being his representatives, being those that carry a special affinity to God, a special heart for God. We have a soul that never dies. We're able to reason, and it gives us an immense importance. It brings my mind is blanking on the word right now, but an inherent value is there. That just because we're in God's image, we have value. So often in today's culture, we have these moments where nobody knows where their value comes from. Yeah. We see it frequently. And my first real encounter with this was 6 months into my first youth pastor position. There was a local high school that was near me where 3 kids committed suicide. And during the second one, a number of my children and in my youth group were institutionalized, believing that they had inadvertently entered a suicide pact with the kid.
A suicide pact. So, yeah. So this is in a local school probably, social contagion things going on.
Absolutely.
And they're entering into a pact together. We're all going to commit suicide.
Absolutely.
Is that what it was?
It was.
It was your youth group who were in that pact.
Yeah, and in investigating, it was more like the kid was asking, hey, if I went to this city, would you guys go with me? You know, if I went here, would you go with me? And all the kids were like, yeah, we'd go with me. But he did ask the question, if I died, would you go with me?
Whoa.
And I really want to encourage any child, if anybody ever asks you following somebody into death, never adhere to that. Please don't agree to that. But the kids in their counseling and in talking to me were telling me we didn't want to harm ourselves. We didn't want to do anything, but we felt we promised this kid.
Yeah.
And so when this happened, I had all the students over my house one night. We had a bonfire. I'm letting them have a time of remembrance for their friend. And through it all, none of these kids could tell me why their life had any value different from the dog that they owned or the bug or the little animal that gets hit on the highway. And it was just this dark moment where I was seeing these kids need to know something more. And it became a kind of a hobby horse for me in the sense that I will preach on this multiple times to reinforce the importance of the Imago Dei, because it not only is it important to us, but it's important to how we engage and affects how we talk with and treat other people in various aspects of life.
Very much so. We're going to get into that, unpack that a little bit, but first I want to just stay on the concept of Imago Dei for a minute and how people don't know that they're made in God's image. So Calvin's Institutes pretty much opens with this idea that the Bible is essential, the revelation from God is essential because it tells us who He is and who we are. And isn't it striking? The way you're saying it, it's so striking that so many people just don't even know who they are. Something that basic, that essential. They're cut off from the knowledge of who and what they really are. We could also add, not only are we made in the image of God, but we're also fallen, right? So the fall is an essential part. Genesis 3 is an essential part. Genesis 1 is essential. And then there's redemption. And if you're in Christ, you're redeemed. And that's now who you are. So there are these basic identities that are so essential, and yet people don't have them. And I remember, for example, recently the Joe Rogan podcast, the biggest podcast in the world, more people watch that than any other. He had on one of the very best intelligent design guys. His name is Stephen Meyer. I really admire Stephen Meyer. Too many Meyers going on there. And I've read a lot of his stuff and interacted with him and watched some videos with him. And so he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was presenting a case for the existence of God as we see in creation, right? The heavens declare, but he was down into DNA and all this stuff. And Jogan was, I've seen Rogan a bunch of times. He's usually jovial and happy, and they laugh a lot, and he interacts with people. He was like stone cold face. He was like, hostile towards Stephen Meyer. The only time he smiled or laughed that entire podcast was when he was talking to Jamie, his producer over there. Then they laughed a little bit. But anyhow, at one point, Meyer was saying things that seemed to indicate we're different from the animals. We're in a different category. I don't think he used the Imago Dei words or anything. But Joe Rogan responded, "Really? You think we're different than them? Like, Joe, you don't even know that?" And then he went on to say, well, what about the bonobos? Kind of monkeys. What about them? And he might have named other things. What about a squid? They're really intelligent. And I wanted to say, okay, I think Meyer was too nice to him. I would want to, you're on his show, you want to treat him with respect. He's a big dog. But I would have wanted to say, show me a book they've written. Right? Show me a city they've built. Show me a Tesla they've produced. Just show me. I mean, there's such a huge gap. And a guy like Joe Rogan didn't get that.
Yeah.
So where's like the average high school boy, the high school girl, and I was that. I didn't know Christ till I was 17. And I was just lost, had no idea who I am, didn't know there was a God. So yeah, the Imago Dei, people need to know it, don't they?
Absolutely.
They need to know it.
Very much so it is. It is, to me, it is one of the most vital starting points of understanding who we truly are.
So it affects us, we want to talk about this, in how we treat other people. All kinds of other people, and it's going to have really massive effect on how we view them, how we think about them, what's in our hearts about them, how we speak to them and all that. Would you talk about that? Get us started.
Absolutely. So I've been teaching this for 5 years or so as a youth pastor and working with my kids, but ironically where I wasn't engaged with too many people that were too different from me, but I took on a job being a hospice chaplain. And I got done with my training with my mentor and my supervisor there. In the first house I go to, I'm reading through the notes of the previous chaplain, and I come to find out that this couple, or the patient I'm going to, is being cared for by a couple that's a same-sex couple. It's two men, and then I get to the house, and I'm like, first off, I'm a little like, oh, okay. Yeah. I'm going to be encountered with my belief system here that this affects everybody I do, that I have to give them respect and dignity. And so I walk in this house and start having conversation, and we're having a good time. And then I come to find out that in the middle of this, that this patient had a family that were the good religious people. They were Catholic. They were all the good people in the family. They'd been caring for the patient. And they had completely abused the patient. The patient had bed sores and wounds and open wounds and was just horribly neglected.
I just want to address, like, from a theological, biblical vantage point, how can that be? How do we explain that? Well, we do have a biblical explanation for that, and that is that, let's say it wasn't just a Catholic couple, because they maybe not have been converted, right?
Yeah.
But let's say you had a evangelical, professing Christian couple. They're a member of this church that we're sitting in. They teach Sunday school, whatever. And let's say they treated the patient poorly. How do you explain that? Well, the grace of God that changes us instructs us to deny ungodliness and to live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present age. But we don't all get that down on our first day of being saved. And so the grace of God doesn't make us all different. So those people must have started in a place in life that the grace of God probably brought them a good distance already, but they weren't at the point yet where they realized, I had to take really good care of this person who's very ill. But we also have a doctrine that is commonly called, it's called common grace. All right, too many commas there. It's called common grace. What's that? God gives gifts to unbelievers. He causes the sun to shine on their fields. He causes rain to fall on their fields. He gives gifts, and he gives gifts of common grace that are character gifts, that are personality gifts. And so you might have a couple living next door to you, and they're not believers at all, and they have a wonderful marriage, and he's a great father and a great husband, and you and your wife in Christ might be struggling terribly in your marriage. How do you explain that? Well, God has given them a lot of common grace, and you started from a place of way less common grace, and the saving grace of God is having to bring you up, and you got a ways to go. And you might struggle all of life because of what happened back then and how it shaped you and formed you. So you agree with all that, the common grace thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go back to the image of God and how it causes us to treat other people. So I'm wherever I am in life someday, and I meet two women who are married, a lesbian couple. What do I know about them?
Honestly, nothing other than they're created in the image of God. And so when you engage them, you want to make sure that you're treating them with that dignity and respect and finding out where they're at. Being able to come and getting to know people helps us to, when we look at the stories of Jesus, he's constantly getting into knowing more about those that are hurting. The blind man, the woman with the bleed who wants to be healed, the woman at the well. Throughout all of those stories, there's always more to the story. Yeah. It's not just the initial problem. There's always more to it. There's always a depth to the story. And the healing that comes is so much deeper than that surface level often what's there. And so when we're struggling with something, we have somebody who's an alcoholic or dealing with drugs or dealing with other, or angry, we can so often have those moments where they continue to struggle because there's something deeper rooted that they're holding on to, and that's just a symptom of it. Mm-hmm. There's a deeper problem that's there. There's an abuse. There's a pain. There's something there, and until we can allow Christ into those deep parts of our soul to help heal us in those, then we're at a loss, and we're just going to continue on in those systematic or symptomatic sins, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. So I want to make a distinction here, see if you agree with it. So understanding that every person I will ever meet, no matter how they have degraded themselves or how highfalutin they are, every single one of them is made in the image of God. And that should incline my heart to treat them with dignity and respect, to honor them. So that's one thing I want to establish. That's one thing. Every person I'll ever meet. So if you need that, take that. If there's somebody you're not treating with that kind of dignity and respect, then ask the Lord to help you to do that, because they are creatures made in the image of God. They have great value. Even if it's, you hear the phrase, if it's a gutter bum, we don't use that phrase anymore, but when I was a kid we used that phrase. If it's a gutter bum, drinking themselves into a premature death, they're still, even though it's marred, it's harder to see, they're very much made in the image of God, and they're deserving of our love, our respect, our care, and all that. The other side is, though, this doesn't mean, I want to see if you agree, this doesn't mean that we always have to be nice to everybody. Jesus wasn't real nice to the Pharisees. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. And he called them all kinds of names, dead men's tombs and all this stuff full of stinking bones. Was he treating them like they were made in the image of God? He was. They were made in the image of God. Therefore, their rejection of God and the truth is so bad that they deserved his pronouncement of woes. So I'm just making the point. It doesn't mean we always have to be nice, right? There are times when we need to be firm about things, but we're still viewing that person very much as in the image of God. Yeah. All right,
we actually almost deny the truth in the moment when we've known somebody for a lengthy period of time and they're in the midst of sin, and when we don't give them the truth, and we're not caring for them in those moments. And so we almost actually deny the image of God in those moments where we just let somebody go on in their sin and continue on in it without at least expressing a concern or a care of what God's plan is and what God's desire of redemption and care for them would be. And so on that one hand, but you talk about the lowliest. I remember hearing a story of a missionary one time where they were in China, and they're driving down the road, and they look over. The wife looks over as they're driving, and somebody had fallen over in a wheelchair, and the people went around the wheelchair like it was a stone in the river. And she stop this car. And she got out and went and helped the man up. And people were looking at them like they were just had two heads, like it was a foreign concept where they were at in China to actually care for somebody that way. They could not understand it. And so there are those moments where our society even doesn't know to care for it. We all too often want to care for the people that are beautiful, the people that are advantageous for us. And so when we look at our, like in the church, we can deny the Imago Dei in how we have if we have partiality within our own members in our own churches. Even in our own churches, we have to be cautious and careful to make sure, hey, this guy is well off over here. We want to make sure we treat him better. We have this single mother over here who's having a really hard time. We don't need to focus on her so much, where oftentimes that needs to maybe be flipped entirely on how we care.
What if you have family? Some of you have family, and this really hurts. You have family that you came from. Maybe it was your mother, your father, your siblings, it was your aunts and uncles. Maybe it was the whole lot of them. I've got some of this in my background. Maybe you have family that was just very dysfunctional. and it really messed with you. Maybe it really messed you up. It made your life very hard. You're still scarred. You're still struggling. You just wish you could have a nice, squeaky clean, pretty Hearts and Flowers family, but you don't. And you had all kinds of, I don't know, maybe there was heavy drinking, maybe there was drug abuse, maybe there was all kinds of, like I know a guy, when he was a boy, he never knew his father. There's lots of boys like that now. There's more boys than ever in America like that right now. He never knew his father. And how do I want to put this? His wife had a steady flow of different men into the house all the time. And so those men would treat him very gruffly and very poorly. His mother would never side with him in the way those men treated him. So he got to where when those men would show up every day, he'd go out in the backyard where there was an upside down boat on cinder blocks, and he'd get under the boat and hide. And those were some of his most intense, vivid memories of his childhood. So some of you have had something, maybe not like that, but you've had something. How do you view those people who were so jacked up and treated you so badly? I can understand if you're dealing with some anger issues, but you got to rein in that anger, because the Bible says, put away all anger and wrath and malice and evil speaking, put them away from you. We got to mortify that. So there's a job for you. But how do we treat even those kinds of people? I'm going to ask you to answer that.
A lot of it's going to be through, having prayer, or through prayer that we can be praying for them. I think just in the midst of seeing the dysfunction, seeing the brokenness and the pain that we need to we honor the Imago Dei just first off by praying for them. But then in the moment of that, so that we can have a heart that's able to forgive. And we need to be able to actually do that. And yeah, there's boundaries that we need to be set. There's things that we need to make sure we're protecting ourselves, of course. But there's ways that we can still honor the spirit that's there of the Imago Dei, to make sure that we're still demonstrating the love of Christ. And like you said, don't have to be nice. It's not always that. Sometimes we have to be firm.
Might be real firm.
Yeah, we have to be real firm with it. But it's still that moment where we're able to demonstrate still how much Christ's love is able to allow us to forgive, to release us from that bitterness that can often just fester inside when we have those deep-seated wounds.
Yeah, I think undoubtedly the worst bitterness I've ever seen, the worst anger I've ever, and I've seen it quite a bit, is when family was just horribly abusive. Like the very people that were supposed to protect you and love you, your aunts and uncles, and instead they physically abused you and stuff like that. And that hurt goes so deep, and it messes people up so badly, they'll struggle maybe the rest of their lives with that. But we can take those things to the cross, we can take those things to Christ, and we can still come to a place where we are so humbled by our own sin that we can understand their sin and say, all right, I can have some compassion on them because they were messed up. Yeah, I want them to know Christ. But there's a lot of this stuff in the world, and we pastors run into a lot of it.
We do.
Yeah, we're dealing with it a lot. Hurt people too. All right, I want to change topics. Well, I guess it's kind of close to what we were just talking about. You and I got to talking earlier about this thing that you called appropriately church abuse. There may be various kinds of church abuse. So we should talk about how do pastors sometimes abuse their people. They do. Let's admit that. They do. It's important that we pastors recognize that's a very real possibility. Like it's important that we know there are lines we're not supposed to cross, or that would be pastoral abuse. I'm just going to give an easy example right up front here. So from time to time, this doesn't happen very often, but I'll have somebody approach me and say, I'm going to make this up. I've got an important life decision. I can't decide, do I buy a Ford or a Chevy truck? Ford truck or Chevy truck? Pastor, can you tell me, what's the will of God? Which one should I buy? Not my business, man. I'm not getting into that. Obviously buy a Ford, but it's not my business. I'm not going there. But that was a dumb example. People ask questions about their lives that aren't my business. It's important I know where to draw the lines. I'm staying out of that. They get to make those decisions. I don't want to be the pastor that's making all the, and if you didn't take my counsel, you're bad. You should have taken my decision. But that's just entry level talking about this. There's serious levels of pastors abusing people. And then I want you to talk about that. Hearing
a pastor tell me something that I know if it was ever said to a congregant, it would be devastating. I mean, you think, especially those who may have had been a part of like a Catholic church where the priest absolves their sins, and they're committed to the leaders of the church. And to hear a pastor at one point in my life tell me that he would not accept my apology and request for forgiveness. He would not forgive me because I hadn't shown a pattern of repentance over an issue that wasn't even sinful.
Wasn't even sinful.
Wasn't even sinful.
The issue itself wasn't even sinful to start with.
It was a complete ideological difference.
Often people can't see that that's not sin. Like, I think I'm the target of a lot of things where they think what you're doing is sin. This is not sinful. Show me the command of the Bible. But anyway, so you experienced this. How'd that end? Did it get any better?
No. We were out of that church as quickly as we could, and it was unfortunately somebody we'd known for some time, and it was a difficult season for us, both literally and physically in the wilderness for us.
Yeah.
We were out in the middle of the desert in California, and but it was some time there, and it was a lot of tough years and took us some time, and still recovering from it.
Would you say, I'm going to make a guess, actually we talked about this before, but I was guessing, would you say that there are, people abuse this, I don't want to abuse this, were there narcissistic tendencies in that pastor?
Very much
I'm
so.
thinking there were. That's a pattern.
Yes.
So that's a real cause of pastoral abuse. Somebody who's kind of narcissistic, and they want to be controlling the sheep and telling everybody what to do, and then they get angry when things like there's anger issues that come out and so on. Does this guy have anger issues?
Very much. And if you think about this, here where you have, this is on an ideological issue. Can you imagine if you have a congregant coming who's repenting of sin, who's coming into real sin?
And you say, well, I'm not going to forgive your repentance unless...
the pastor's not going to forgive him. So that's there. And yes, I remember this pastor slamming his fist into the table at my wife at one point in a conversation, and at a church business meeting in front of a church leader.
Hey,
so
let me give you a contrast to that.
All right.
So I was 18 years old. The day I turned 18, my mom and dad dropped me off at Washington Bible College near Washington, D.C. I was a brand new convert. I showed up at college. I didn't know anything. I'd memorized a few verses, John 3:16, and I thought, man, I'm way ahead of everybody else. I know John 3:16, and I didn't know they were raised in Sunday school and they knew a whole lot. Anyway, so I had a lot of ways to be humbled. But so my first semester, I had Professor Willis Bishop. He looked like an angel. There was a glow about him. He was so godly. He also had no sense of humor. But anyway, so he gave us an exam one day, and he would trust us. You graded your own exam. So you'd take the exam, and then he'd say, now question number 1, the answer was blah, blah, blah. And you grade your own exam. And then at the end of grading your own exam, he'd call you out name by name. He'd say, okay, Steve, what was your grade? And you'd say 86, and he'd write it down. Well, I was a brand new convert, didn't have this part fixed yet. I had been known to cheat sometimes in high school, all right? And so I lied, and I gave him a number that was higher than what I actually scored on the exam, and no one knew, and he wrote it down, and that was that. And I went back to my room. I don't know how long it took. It was probably the next day. I thought, I've lied. I'm not supposed to do that anymore. The word says right there, don't lie. So I went back to him. Now he's going to be in contrast to this pastor who wouldn't receive your forgiveness. Yeah. So I went and told him what I did. And here's pretty much what he said. Well, Steve, has the Lord forgiven you? Yes, I believe he has. I've taken it to the cross. I've gone to Christ. I've repented and all that. He says, then so do I. Don't do it anymore. Pretty cool.
That's amazing.
Has the Lord forgiven you? Then so do I. But pastoral abuse. I don't know if you have any other examples on the tip of your tongue. Any other thoughts about that? All right, so I knew a pastor in Southern California who was found to have, absconded with hundreds of thousands of dollars unseen from the church budget, but they found him out, and had also been engaged in bad kind of child abuse with children in the church building. And there had been a history of this. And he was found out, and he did jail time. Rightly so. Send that man to jail. Yeah, call the cops, turn him in, and they did, and he went to jail. But that's a whole other level of pastoral abuse there, isn't it? Yeah.
Actually, yes. There's another area although it's a great doctrine of church discipline that we hold to, making sure that we hold each other accountable, though seeing it done poorly.
Diotrephes.
And seeing it done well. So I've actually seen it both, and in one sense, I remember seeing a church where the one of the main leaders in the church, the wife had an affair, and it was quickly found out, done. She was excommunicated immediately.
Just like that.
Just like that, boom. Not like hardly a dialogue.
0 to 60
done.
Yeah.
Was found out. Couldn't come in. And then later it was found that some of the other leaders in the church, that their kids had been involved in affairs. And it was just brushed under the rug and nothing done. So it was a big dichotomy where it wasn't even handled well at all. It was completely on both, neither one. There was no process. There was no finding out about the sin. There was no seeking out to see what was going on. But then I've also seen it done well where somebody is in sin, somebody is struggling with the sin, and the elders have come alongside. They've worked with the person. They've walked through it. They've carefully walked through it, but the person hasn't repented. They've continued on. It's gone on. And then even having to approach it in front of the entire congregation, and but yet done so gracefully and done so well to where that person was received back in fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And so seeing it on both sides, where one is this just knee-jerk reaction to the sin that, wow, this person's got to be gone so quickly. I think back to my late high school, early college years of hearing of kids who would come to a pastor and oh man, I'm struggling with same-sex attraction. And rather than caring for them to work them through that, they kicked them out of the church.
Boom, like that.
And it was prevalent in the late 90s, early 2000s, where a kid wasn't able to work through the struggles they were having, and they were done a really big disservice by the church.
Yeah, sorry to hear that. It's important that we pastors know that and know what lane we're allowed to swim in and what lanes we're not allowed to swim in. Amen. Well, Anton, this has been really great, man. Can't believe I ran into you, and you know Robert Elliott. You've been to the Reformed Baptist Church of Riverside. Whoa! Yeah. I was going to say tell him I said hi, but no, you're here now. Yeah. Well,
I could text him. I've still got contact with him on occasion.
Yeah, I haven't talked to him for a while. It's funny. I just ran into another guy I know from years ago at this conference, and he's been in touch with Robert Elliott recently and told me how it's going in the church.
I don't know if you know how many guys here know Robert.
A lot?
Oh, yeah. Well, Sam Waldron told me, who was one of the other speakers, that he was just at Robert's church about a year ago. So a lot of, Robert's one of those hidden celebrities. Yeah. He doesn't ever want to get his name out, but man, he is something else.
Every now and then I drop into their website. I drop into a lot of websites and see what's that pastor doing. So I drop in there and look at their service. Well, they have the cameras on while people are just meandering into the service. So I got to see that. And lo and behold, they had Paul Washer preaching there that night.
Yep.
Because he was in Southern Cal for the Shepherds Conference at MacArthur's church, and they got Paul. I thought, why can't we have a conference with Paul Washer near our church, and we can get him in?
Well, they have one of the other pastors that's on staff, or there is Troy Lamberth. Have you met Troy? Yeah. Have you seen what they're doing with Five Solas? The Five Sola films.
What are they doing?
So initially starting, they did the Martin Luther as told by the Littles, John Calvin as told by the Littles, Katie Luther as told by the Littles, and basically it's these condensed mini biographies where the adults are acting it out with the kids' voices over the top of it. And
that's insane.
Yeah,
they're filming this.
And they're filming it. Yeah, so the first three are.
I gotta look for that.
I think they've done Knox. John Knox and a few others, and they're phenomenal shows. They've done a great job with them.
Are these on their website?
Yeah.
Oh, I got to go see them.
So
this is the Reformed Baptist Church of Riverside. Go there.
So actually, I think it's on YouTube as the Five Sola films. Look up Five Solas.
But go to their website. Yeah. You can find those. Go to their YouTube channel. I'm going to go there. Maybe on the plane on the way.
I think, and the John Calvin one, my wife actually helped with the costumes with them on it.
Did she really?
So it was a lot of fun. And we filmed it at the Teen Challenge Castle there. So it was a lot of fun. We had a great time with that one.
Anton, thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome.
I don't know if I'll ever meet you in person again. If not, see you in glory. Huh?
Sounds great.
Sounds great. Thank you all for joining us today. This has been another Grounded. You know where to find us. We come out twice a month. Hope you join us. Tell some friends about the show. Thanks.